Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the top-tier brewing stand. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers. It's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy. Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, Cretans.
Another fine day in the studios here with my good friend Johnny Palmer.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. It's pouring buckets.
Yeah, you've gotten your aggressions out. You punched a hole through the wall at the brewery.
Yeah. I helped make more space for Jamil.
Yes,
in his beer.
Yes, we hacked a big hole in the wall and
I cut
nearly double our space. Yeah, I got cut. I bled. I tell you, when I'm doing construction because there's blood.
Yeah.
Or when I'm scratching my nutsack, or
or
doing construction.
like
Either way, there's blood. Yeah, that's just how it works with me.
If Jamil has his hand in,
I'm a bleeder.
Yeah.
Is that why your first flagship beer was a red ale?
Yes.
Little Jamil blood in there?
Oh yeah. It's like, well, what do we do? There's a lot of blood in here. It's getting kind of red. Well, red ale. So yeah, every time. That's why I look a little pale after we brew twin. I'm just like, we got to keep it the same. People enjoyed it.
You would have made a great doctor in like the 1850s.
Bleed them. Yes, bleed them. Of course. And I enjoy leeches, so there you go.
At least putting them on other people.
Right. Oh, I love the feel of a good leech. Love the feel of a good leech.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we've got a wonderful guest here.
We do.
Join us, and we're going to talk about water and brewing cities. I know we've talked a lot about water, but we talked a lot about brewing cities. Great cities like Indianapolis, where our fine sponsor, Blickman Engineering,
is
there located.
Yeah.
Where, world-famous Indianapolis water.
It's a fine water source.
Right, and it must be the water that makes the people of Blickman Engineering so brilliant that they make such innovative and unusual, brewing equipment. So, if you want to see what the Indianapolis water hath created, and maybe it's just all the chemicals in water, I don't know. Go over to BlickmanEngineering.com, Blickman with two N's, engineering.com, and check out all the cool stuff they have. Tell them how much you appreciate that they pay for this show so you don't have to, and keep John and I gainfully employed and off the streets.
That's right, yeah.
All right, so why don't you introduce our fine guest today?
Another fine Indiananite. I'm not sure how you say that, Martin. Sorry. This is want to welcome Martin Brungard to the show. Many of you may have read his articles in his iMergy magazine. He also was one of the tech editors on the Water Book, and one of the water gurus I go to when I have questions. So welcome to the program, Martin.
Thank you, John. How are you guys doing?
We're doing real well.
Well, good to hear you. Although, Jamil, I'll tell you that John Blickman is up the road here in West Lafayette. So, but
it's
I've
not
got
that
plenty
far.
of their
Same water. Would the water be the same? Lafayette,
Yeah. It's all snow melt from the cow fields, right?
Oh, yes, sure. And needless to say, I've got plenty of Blickman equipment in my brewery, so it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So we want to talk a bit about classic brewing cities. In the Water Book, Colin and I talked about the dogma of virgin water, and brewers tend to grab onto the idea that if they want to brew a genuine Guinness stout, they need to brew with Dublin groundwater. If they want to brew a genuine Dortmunder export, they need to brew with that city's water. And I think what I was trying to say in the water book, and I think what you've done a better job of explaining, Martin, is as brewers, we don't necessarily brew with the water as is. We make adjustments to it. We adapt the water source and our recipe to brew, the best beer we can. We don't just brew with things as is generally.
Absolutely, and the thing is that regardless of your water source, it's a rare water that you can actually just take out of the tap or out of the well or whatever and brew with it as is. Okay. In the old historic brewers, the same way. They did things to make sure that the beer ended up the way they wanted.
Okay, yeah. Well, should we take a quick break, and then we'll come back? We'll dive into the subject a bit more.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll be back after this.
In a world where everything has been lost.
What happened to the city? It's in ruins.
Only one man has the ancient knowledge to restore civilization.
I need a drink. Oh no, the liquor store's been ransacked.
You looking for beer, stranger? Boy, all the liquor got drunk up in the first 25 minutes of the apocalypse.
Wait, there's still some bottles over... Oh, no. Those are non-alcoholic beer.
I reckon you better stick to arrowroot tea and a desperate nomadic existence like the rest of us.
People, I'm a home brewer. I know how to make alcohol. It can't be done. Come with me if you want the beer. Okay, I'm going to need some big plastic buckets.
He is the chosen one. The prophecies say that he's going to get us wasted.
Someone start heating water. And
from the creators of Northern Brewer, the people who brought you massive selection and superior customer service, comes the Homebrewer.
Blickman Engineering. Think innovation, passion, quality, and customer service. Blickman gear is designed by brewers to give you a sense of pride in your equipment. At Blickman, they know what makes brewing a pain and build gear that makes it fun. Like the intuitive beer gun, a completely different approach to filling bottles. The Therminator Wort Chiller, a new take on a plate chiller that's sized for flow, performance, and the high groundwater temps homebrewers face every day. The Brewmometer, a brilliant weldless thermometer design with brewing parameters right on the dial. The Autosparge, ultimate simplicity for preventing an overflow or running your mash tun dry. And much more, like the modular top-tier brewing stand, conical fermenters, and their Boilermaker brew pots. With more cutting-edge equipment coming soon, keep up with the latest from Blickman at blickmanengineering.com and stay on the cutting edge.
Hey brewers, it's planting season. Have you ever dreamt of walking through your own hop garden? Well, look no further than Woodburn, Oregon, and the Crosby Family Hop Farm. Blake Crosby and his family have been passionately growing hops for 5 generations. And right now, they're taking orders for 2014 rhizomes for all retail and wholesale customers. The Crosbys know how to grow hops and are here to help you establish your family's very own successful hop garden. In fact, when you plant a hop rhizome from the Crosbys, you're using the same plant your favorite professional brewer bought his hops from. Friendly professional service, fast shipment, and quality hops at competitive prices. The Crosby family brings all of this to you. Call 503-982-5166 or visit bcrosbyhops.com and let Blake Crosby and the Crosby Hop Farm help make your hop garden a reality. bcrosbyhops.com. Hops from the Crosby Family Farm to yours.
When I order a beer, I want my server to know more about it than I do. I want someone who enjoys good beer and loves helping others enjoy it too. I want someone who knows how to pour a perfect pint for any beer style. I want a Cicerone. The Cicerone certification program is creating the type of people who help you enjoy great beer. Home brewers and craft beer lovers know beer is more flavorful and complex than ever, and it takes some serious knowledge to store and serve beer right. Cicerones know beer. There are 3 levels in the Cicerone program: Certified Beer Server, Certified Cicerone, and Master Cicerone. Cicerones are truly the sommeliers of beer. The best beer locations have a certified Cicerone on staff. Relaxed and unpretentious, Cicerones are tested on storing and serving beer, beer styles, flavor and tasting, the brewing process and ingredients, and pairing food with beer. Learn more about your next beer guide at cicerone.org. Certified Cicerone, because it takes top talent to present a perfect pint.
All right, BN Army, it's trivia time. What's the only homebrew shop with over 1,000 recipe kits, $4.99 shipping on orders over $100, and is also home of the Wolf Shirt? The one and only answer is Austin Homebrew Supply. For over 20 years, they've specialized in creating recipes such as the best-selling Texas Blonde Ale, Apocalypso, Hop Bomb 2.0, and Double Chocolate Stout. And they just recently unveiled their small grain kits that produce 1 gallon of beer. Visit AustinHomebrew.com to browse their extensive catalog of equipment and ingredients. They also have mini clone recipes of your favorite commercial beers. They're the exclusive retailer of BrewVent yeast fuel as well, Yeast Nutrient, and the all-new Bodybuilder. Follow Austin Homebrew Supply on Google Plus to participate in video hangouts on popular brewing topics. So visit AustinHomebrew.com today and make sure you sign up for their weekly email with news and specials. Austin Homebrew Supply, AustinHomebrew.com.
Back to the 2 guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking the waters of Dublin and London today. Martin, one of the things that has always come up to me is, I've tasted beers where people say, yeah, just the water exactly like, Burton-on-Trent, exactly like, Dortmund, exactly like Dublin, and the beers were horrible. And, and I'm like, why did you do that? Maybe do half that and try that. So I'm not that much of a water guy. I'm always like, so often people seem to screw up their water more than they seem to help it. And, what is it that they should be taking away from the water of these cities? What is it that they should information they should get from those cities? And then how should they apply that to their brewing?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one thing is that often those water profiles that are shown, they include all the alkalinity and all the calcium that the natural water has. And unfortunately, the brewers of those times, they typically reduced it through a variety of treatment methods to make the water better suited to brewing. Mm-hmm. So in something simple that has been around for literally centuries is pre-boiling the water. If you have a water with a lot of bicarbonate or alkalinity and a lot of calcium, you can just boil that water for 15 minutes or something like that. And typically, if it's full of those minerals, they'll drop out as chalk in the bottom of the pot. And you let it set for an hour or so, and the water will clear up, and hey, you've got a nice decarbonated water that has lost all that calcium and in that excess alkalinity. And of course, alkalinity is the one. That's the real killer for any brewing. If you've got a lot of alkalinity in your water, you're going to have a really tough time making anything worth a darn. So that's the big step.
Yeah, it's the alkalinity that gives it that chalky, minerally taste usually.
Yeah, and then and on top of that, it affects the pH to the point where the wort in the beer pH are so high that all the flavors are dull, and like your hopping will get really rough.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. Okay.
Well, so I guess we're going to talk about Dublin, Ireland first.
Sure.
What's we've seen, and I guess the the popular perception of Dublin water is that it's high in chalk, high in alkalinity. What's the actual situation here?
Well, there's actually two stories here. You've got Ireland, and we can talk about Ireland in general. Ireland's like a big imperfect donut, where the center of the donut is a great big hunk of limestone, and the river that feeds through or flows through Dublin just happens to cross all that limestone plain there. So that river, the Liffey River, that flows through Dublin, it is full of chalk, full of calcium and alkalinity, and at least half of Dublin does have water that, you've probably seen the typical Dublin profile, very high calcium, very high bicarbonate or alkalinity numbers. Well, and that's great, and it's true. But that's not necessarily what the famous brewers are brewing with.
Okay.
On top of that, just south of Dublin, there's this great big granite, a big hunk of granite called the Wicklow Mountains, and the water coming off those mountains is actually what the famous Dublin brewer is, Guinness, uses for their brewing. And that water is only a couple of notches more mineralized than, say, a Pilsen water. So there's very little in it.
So it's
very
like a
little
mountain
calcium,
spring water, huh?
Extremely low alkalinity.
Okay. Yeah. So a very pure water, very low mineral
pure
content. Yeah.
And that applies to a lot of other places around Ireland too. It's like I said, the donut, and all the brewers or all the famous breweries, Harp and Beamish and Murphy's and Guinness, they're all located sort of on that periphery where the water just happens to be relatively soft and very low alkalinity, and that makes brewing so much easier.
Okay, but yet this is a region that's known for its dark beers.
Exactly.
So, how do we account for that?
Well, it turns out, and many of your listeners probably have seen some of the information that Gordon Strong has produced in his Brewing Better Beer. And in there he mentions, you can brew a nice stout with RO water, which of course has little alkalinity. And what he does is he separates the roast grains from his main mash. He does his main mash with the RO water and all that stuff. Okay. And then he waits until the final minutes to add the roast grains that add the color and also drive the pH down. And if you did that, if you added all that stuff in the front end, the mash pH would be so low that the wort that you would produce would be so fermentable and thin that it would make just a really crappy beer. Okay. Whereas if you do it the way that Gordon does, and by the way, this is implying that Guinness and all the rest of the major stout brewers, Murphy's and Beamish, they also employ this to avoid an overly low mash pH, and then they just add that. In Guinness's case, they have a separate steeping of their roast barley in that water in a separate pot, and then they just blend that into the regular wort after the mash.
So right prior to fermentation, then.
Yep.
Okay, well that's interesting. So even though they've got a high alkalinity groundwater that conceivably could balance the dark malts that used in stouts, instead they mash the pale malts separately and steep the dark grains separately, and then combine them just before fermentation.
Correct. And the thing is, this is for dry stouts.
Okay.
Other stouts a sweet stout or a Russian Imperial stout or those guys, they actually benefit from having a softer, smoother roast character, and then it's actually very important to utilize a higher alkalinity water, like the perception is. Okay. So when you look at the Dublin water, and it's got a lot of alkalinity, and it should be good for brewing a stout. Well, yes, it is good for brewing a stout other than a dry stout, because the dry stout relies on that sharp acidic tinge to it, and they get it naturally because they have so little alkalinity in their brewing water at Guinness.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, then that's how would the, I guess, for these other stout styles, what levels of alkalinity are we talking that would be more appropriate, for this method?
Well, and of course it varies depending upon the grist.
Okay.
And,
so it really probably comes more down to a resultant mash pH then, as opposed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And whereas with a dry stout, Guinness is probably shooting for a mash pH or a resulting kettle wort pH down in the very low 5 range.
Okay.
Like a 5.0, 5.1, something like that. Whereas I and many other brewers have found that for these other roasty stout styles that are not dry stouts, aiming for a kettle wort pH that's a little bit higher, maybe a 5.5, 5.6, the roastiness becomes so much smoother and much more pleasant, less acrid.
Okay.
So it's you adjust things to create that.
Interesting. Okay.
Let's do this. Let's take another short break, and when we come back, we'll go more into water in Dublin and London right after this.
A few things happened 30 years ago.
ARPANET migrated to TCP/IP, and the Internet was born. Revenge of the Jedi was renamed Return of the Jedi and opened in theaters. Mila Kunis and Emily Blunt were born, beginning a rad fantasy in my mind.
But all of that pales next to the fact that HopTech opened its doors and began blowing homebrewers right out of their mash tuns. HopTech doesn't fuck around. Real people shipping awesome shit straight to you. Their new website is fast and easy to navigate. Or just call 800-379-4677 and let badass bitch Jade and brewing brother Roberto blow their warm load of customer service all over you. So visit the site or visit the store in Dublin, California, and support those that support you. Get your brewing on at hoptech.com.
Hey, dude, you know what beer this is?
Oh, no, all the labels are falling off.
Yeah, or the ink is run.
Well, if it's the pale ale, you're good, but stay away from the quote-unquote Belgian.
Oh, man, this guy needs to get some grog tags.
Grog tags are reusable, write-on, wipe-off, commercial-grade bottle labels for your brew. The guys at Grog Tag are homebrewers. They wanted great-looking, sturdy labels for your bottles, buckets, carboys, kegs, and growlers. They also wanted a label that not only looks good, but can be easily removed and reapplied during bottling without that nasty glue residue being left behind. No residue, water-resistant, and ice chest approved. Grog tags stay on in water or an ice chest, and they stay legible. Visit grogtag.com to customize your label or coaster from dozens of different templates for free and see how awesome your bottles can look.
Ugh, it's that pseudo-Belgian.
Yeah, we're getting him some grog tags, dude.
Grog Tag. At least your beer will look good. grogtag.com.
Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. This is Jamil Zanishev, and I want to tell you about my favorite heretic beer, Shallow Grave Porter. I love the rich, malty character of this beer. While full and rich, Shallow Grave has an easy drinking finish that isn't too sweet. I've always loved my homebrew porter recipe, so when it's time to brew Heretic Shallow Grave, I started with that in mind. but I tweaked it with all my latest recipe ideas. Just like in homebrewing, I made sure we used only the finest malts that would produce the ideal flavor for this beer. We used select British malts to get the rich chocolate and caramel flavors, and we spared no expense. The result is a beer as dark as a moonless night, with hints of vanilla, coffee, and chocolate, perfect for a cool evening out in the woods. Cheers.
Hey, Wooly, I'm beat. Can we find a nice tree to just hang out in for a while?
You're beat. I've been swinging through this forest for 50 years, ever since we first escaped from the circus. I know, but there's got to be more to life than exploring this creek and trying to populate the valley by copulating with loose, hairy girls. Marquis, stop. Look.
What is that?
It looks like a man-made treehouse.
With fresh food.
And craft beer.
Welcome to the Creek Monkey Tap House, boys. Grab a seat. Creek Monkeys drink free.
Awesome!
The Creek Monkey Tap House in Martinez, California takes their mission of fresh food and beer seriously. They only serve locally raised beef and chicken, as well as local sustainable produce. It's better for you and the planet, and it just tastes better. The beer and wine at Creek Monkey Tap House are chosen with the same care for the highest quality and rotate frequently to make each visit an adventure. Swing on into the Creek Monkey Tap House and enjoy a new legend of amazing food, beer, and wine. The Creek Monkey Tap House, online at creekmonkey.com.
Like the Lance Armstrong of the beer world. Except for that nut thing.
This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back.
Yep.
Having a wonderful afternoon talking waters of Dublin and London.
Yep.
All right.
Even though it's raining cats and dogs outside.
Right. You don't want to brew with cats and dogs.
No.
It's really not the way to go.
Yeah, they put up a fuss.
Make your water catty. Or doggy or whatever it is. All right. So where were we?
Well, we were just talking about a little bit about what kind of character we want in a water for brewing stouts. And, we kind of look for the wort pH, really, rather than, say, a particular mineral character in the water. Is that correct, Martin?
That is correct. Ultimately, it's pH that controls.
Okay. Is there any, in terms of the other characters of the water, say the sulfate to chloride ratio, is there any leaning one way or another we're looking for in a stout, do you think?
Well, in some respects there is. And one of the things that's most important with regard to, this Dublin stuff, since we're on the stout thing, those flavor ions, sodium chloride, sulfate, and magnesium, they're all at pretty low levels. I mean, this when you look at the waters of the area, once you get beyond the calcium and the alkalinity, there really isn't much to it. And when you think about it, okay, that makes sense because I don't really taste anything from the water. Okay. It's nothing like a Burton water where you're it's really drying you out or things like that. But so very low chlorides and sulfates. Actually, in most respects, that ratio is kind of those ions are at such a low level that the ratio doesn't really matter a whole lot.
Okay.
So it's not a big deal. The bottom line is they're low.
Okay. Is it fair to say that for a person brewing a dry stout that they don't want to raise the chloride or sulfate levels?
Well, it depends where they started out at, but more than likely they're let's see, the water off the Wicklow Mountains that Guinness gets their water from, it's roughly 20 ppm for the chloride and the sulfate, so it's roughly even.
Yeah, so it isn't, and it's low too.
It's very low. And for the water in Dublin out of the Liffey River, which is used as their water source, Sulfate's a little bit higher, maybe 55, and the chloride is still only about 20. So really not much. And the sodium in both cases, right around 10 to 15. So, not much.
Too. Okay. Could we use this type of water for any other styles?
Well, I guess you could. I don't see any reason why you couldn't.
Okay.
To tell you the truth, and as I said, that Wicklow Mountain water that Guinness uses, it's only a couple of steps off of Pilsen water. You could be making a Pilsen with this and have a great result.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's move on to London. How does London water differ from Dublin? I mean, it's the same kind of region of the world, isn't it?
Well, and of course, it's across the sea in between.
Yeah.
So
not to really mortally
to our
offend
UK listeners because I don't remember what the geography is, but London is a strange case. It turns out that, and I just finished up the research for the London article that you AHA members will see in another month and a half.
Okay.
Turns out that London actually has, in essence, two different water sources. So they have this water out of the Thames River, and it's kind of the regular. It's hard and it's alkaline, and it's got a bit of sulfate and a very modest chloride level, but it's kind of a regular
surface water kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, surface water. But what a lot of breweries back in the day did in the center of London, they had wells that went into what they called their chalk aquifer. Chalk as in chalkboard.
Yep.
That mineral. It turns out that in London, the chalk aquifer, instead of being very hard and alkaline, it's actually full of sodium and chloride too. Oh. So in many respects, that is probably one of the key differentiators that made London porters world famous, was the amount of sodium and chloride in their brewing water. And we typically talk about keeping sodium well below 40 parts per million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for that chalk aquifer, it's 100 plus. It's a little over 100. So it's high, but it's not crazy high. In 100 ppm is not salty tasting. You'd have to get over 250 ppm before you really started getting into the salty taste. So whereas this chalk water has a lot of sodium and chloride in it, it's not that high. So you
but
really
it acts
can
to
do it.
Kind of accentuate the malt flavors and bring out some of those malt flavors.
And John, I remember when we were working on the water book, you did that experiment with sodium and looking at what it did to the beer. You were like spiking a regular beer with it, and
I was spiking a Mirror Pond Pale Ale, and with
Deschutes.
The Deschutes Mirror Pond, and I was using sodium bicarbonate and what other, and gypsum, adding those two, and I you're right, I got up to 200, 400 ppm, and it wasn't until I got fairly high that I could really taste a metallic character to the water.
And you said you were like 400 ppm or something like that?
Yeah, in that case.
Which is crazy high.
Yeah.
Crazy high. You don't ever want to go there with your brewing water.
Right.
But like I said, this London chalk water, roughly 100 ppm sodium and about, almost 200 ppm chloride.
Uh-huh.
And London porters were revered around the world as being absolutely top notch, to the point where not only were the beers exported, but the entire style was exported. I mean, Guinness and Beamish and all those guys and all the Baltic porters, they gained their foothold because they saw what London was doing, and they wanted to do the same.
They try to copy it. Yeah,
you betcha.
Yeah, and in the water book, we talk about, as a general rule, not to exceed 100 ppm of sodium to avoid metallic flavors. But I think we tend to be speaking from a lager brewing point of view or a IPA point of view, where you start with high gypsum levels, especially, you tend to get some metallic nuances to the flavor. But if you've got a different beer style and a different mineral profile, then everything in moderation, you can end up with a nice seasoning of the beer instead.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we're talking about a porter, so there's plenty of flavor to hide behind. And here, you're accentuating the beer and, as you say, seasoning.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. What do we know about how the London brewers were treating and handling this water? Were they? I mean, they were kind of pulling from two sources. You said, did they use both sources in the production of the porter, or how much do we know about this?
It turns out that the water sources tend to be sort of provincial. So there are areas of London that receive their water from the Thames, and then there are other areas that receive their water from wells and so on. And it appears that most of the porter breweries were taking their water from actually, the Thames River is a tidal river. London's almost at the sea. It's only a few 10 or 15 miles upstream from the North Sea. And back in the old days, 1700s or whatever, they actually drew their water directly out of the Thames, right in front of, in essence, what is in essence Parliament now, in the Big Ben and all that. And that water, because there was seawater underneath the fresh water that was flowing over the top of the seawater.
Oh, okay. Yep.
That water was a little bit salty, and it was reputed to be great porter water. So, for sure, the sodium and the chloride that came from the tidal portion of the Thames River, and then also from the chalk aquifer, these wells, dynamite stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing was, it does have high alkalinity, reasonably high alkalinity. And when you combine that with a typical porter grist, either starting back in the old days, it was all brown malt. Right. But then back in the, I want to say, early 1800s, that fella invented black patent malt. Right. And then everybody switched over to a little bit of black patent. Okay, too many beers. Black patent malt with a pale malt base, because pale malt was just
much higher extract yield.
Much better, yes.
Yeah.
So it turns out that chalk water or the London Thames water or tidal Thames water was perfect for brewing a porter. Ended up with a slightly higher pH, in the over 5.4, probably in the 5.5, 5.6 range.
Okay.
And like I said, that really smooths out the roasty flavors, so it's a real bonus. So it's not a surprise that they were making dynamite beers.
Okay.
But then, so we've got the two different waters, and of course, London is also known for bitters and pale ales, and actually, London was where India Pale Ales started. Okay. The Hodgson Brewery was right there in London, and they had a sweetheart deal with whatever the importer to India was, and they created a passable, highly hopped beer that made the trip. But the thing was that they were dealing with a water that, like I said, was high in calcium, high in alkalinity, and again, that kind of water is easily pre-treated by pre-boiling it. So they undoubtedly they were doing that.
Okay.
And after you pre-boiled it, drop that alkalinity and the calcium down, then suddenly that water was much more suitable for brewing a pale beer, bitters and English pale ales. So you literally have two beers that made London famous, and it turns out that it's because there are two waters in London.
I see.
So there you go.
Okay. Interesting. Should we take another quick break and then come back?
Sure. We'll be back right after this.
And now, Northern Brewer presents What If Homebrewers Ruled the World?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll follow me, I will lead you into the gallery area. Now, the first piece up for sale today is a Jamil Zainasheff original, a bottle of 1997 vintage Evil Twin.
I say.
A bidding for this one-of-a-kind piece will start at £7,000. And if you'll continue to follow me, ladies and gentlemen, I can show you a rather abstract piece from Bay Area brewer Justin Crossley. It's a German Doppelbock entitled Justin's Giant Bock. The brewer's notes here indicate that this beer had excellent mouthfeel.
That's just a crazy dream. Or is it? With Northern Brewer, a thirsty nation can craft its own ale and lager for the greater good of mankind. Northern Brewer, the home of superior customer service and the finest selection of home brewing goods for the future.
Hi, I'm Jamil Zainasheff, and in addition to my work on the Brewing Network, I write the Style Profile column in every issue of Brew Your Own magazine.
Hi, I'm Sean Paxton, and when I'm not prepping for the Home Brewed Chef on the Brewing Network, you can find me writing articles on how to cook with your home brew for Brew Your Own magazine.
Greetings, cretins. This is John Palmer, and when I'm not writing for Brew Your Own, I'm reading it.
John Palmer, Sean Paxton, Jamil Zainasheff. If you love listening to them on the Brewing Network, you'll love reading their articles, tips, and recipes in the pages of Brew Your Own magazine. Join Jamil, John, and Sean 8 times a year in Brew Your Own. And when you subscribe to BYO on the Brewing Network website, half of your subscription price goes right back to the BN to support great beer and food programming. So sign up for Brew Your Own magazine through the BN website today so you can listen and read your way to better homebrew. A vial of White Labs yeast is the key to your best beer. When you open a vial of White Labs yeast, you're giving your beer its best chance for a perfect fermentation. In addition to their already incredible variety of yeasts, White Labs is proud to announce WLP 90, San Diego's super yeast, now available year-round. WLP 90 is super clean, super fast fermenting, with low esters and has a neutral flavor and aroma profile. It's alcohol tolerant and highly flocculent. For more of the latest White Labs news, click over to whitelabs.com, where you can read reviews of yeast, learn in the lab section, and join the customer club. And if you should find yourself in San Diego, White Labs has a brand new training facility for craft brewers and home brewers alike. whitelabs.com. Discover yeast, nutrients, enzymes, and more for commercial breweries, home brewers, and homebrew stores. White Labs. It's all in the vial.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, the proud owner here at Keystone Homebrew Supply. We're thrilled to be entering our 20th year of supplying this great industry, and to show you, the Brewing Network Army, how much we appreciate your support, we're offering you 10% off your first order on our website, KeystoneHomebrew.com. Just use coupon code BNARMY at checkout, and I'll get your order out the same day. My goal at Keystone Homebrew Supply has always been to have a complete supply of everything a brewer could want. When you place your order online or when you come into our store, it's our our goal to have everything on your list and more. One aspect of KeystoneHomebrew.com that we're really excited about is the ability to fulfill customers' exact grain bills. Do you hate to wait? Keystone Homebrew Supply can get your precious yeast and hops to you within just one day if you live between Connecticut and Virginia, and within 2 days east of the Mississippi. KeystoneHomebrew.com.
Coupon code DNARMY.
I'm Jason Harris, and I approve this message.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew Strong.
Yeah, during the break, Scott and I had a discussion about water. We talked about how we like to be out on the water, on boats, and that's our water show.
Yeah, well, and they were comparing the size of their boats too.
Yes,
Scott's was much bigger.
And
than
how each of us looks in a bikini.
When I asked how big it was, I wasn't talking about your boat.
Oh yeah, you were. Yeah, there you go.
Thought it was the motion of the ocean.
Speaking of the motion of the ocean, we have our fine sponsor, Adam and Eve, adamandeve.com. Check them out for a limited time only. If you use the offer code Jamil, Jamil, at adamandeve.com. You get one item at 50% off, and then you're going to get a free extra gift, so essential I can't mention on the air, and then 3 free adult DVDs of your choosing. You choose from genres such as anal, amateur, Asian, big breast, big butt, bisexual, chunky, co-eds, fetish, gay, interactive, POV, lesbian, MILFs, etc. And you can also shop from your mobile phone. And you're going to get free shipping on this whole thing. So you buy the one item, 50% off. Free extra gift, 3 free DVDs, and free shipping, all at adamandeve.com. Use the offer code Jamil, Jamil, at adamandeve.com.
Yeah, but honestly, Jamil, you've been talking about this central gift now for years. You would think you'd have gotten over this inhibition of talking about it.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah, I'm still, there's just something, I'm such a shy, retiring flower.
And this is special.
It's embarrassing for me.
Oh, okay.
Martin just wrote me a note on the chat section of Skype saying he can read the categories faster.
Oh, yeah?
I don't believe him, but he insists.
Go for it, Martin. Knock it out.
See? That was so quick. It just sounded like one little noise. Amazing.
That's amazing.
Good job.
That is incredible. I got to give it to him,
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about the waters of London.
Yes. Well, Martin, what else can you tell us about the London brewing water?
What should people be doing? What's their takeaway from this? What should they be targeting for, Dublin? What should they be targeting for London, say, for making a porter? What are good targets for making a porter? What are good targets for making a bitter?
Well, number one, let's stick with London for a moment. In the London Pale Ale, the bitter brewing, it turns out that that Thames water that's been decarbonated and pre-boiled, the sodium is quite low, the magnesium is very low, sulfate is kind of modest at 70 parts per million, and then the chloride is around 40. So here, we're high enough that the ratio actually matters. So,
70 to 40. Yep.
70 to 40, and again, the bicarbonate would be low because of the pre-treatment, the pre-boiling, and for anybody starting out with an RO water, it should be an easy one to create, because if you're brewing a bitter or a pale ale, you really wouldn't have to have much bicarbonate at all. So, and calcium, around 40 ppm, 50 ppm is all you need, and for the most part, it's going to be what was necessary to get that sulfate in there. So, and we'll talk about Burton in a while, but for now, London is like a mini Burton. Okay. And it's a much softer version of Burton water.
Okay, so we're going to talk more about Burton and Bavaria in the next show, in the next hour. And if you're listening live, then be sure to stay tuned and listen for that show as well.
And of course, for the porter, I mentioned that high sodium and high chloride, but the rest of it, sulfate again is in the 80 ppm range. So. Not too much, but it certainly pales in comparison to the sodium and the chloride.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of an interesting contrast to Burton on what we consider to be pale ale water, Burton pale ale water, much higher levels all around. London, especially after pre-boiling, it is generally low levels, and so we're not getting a harsh or a very firm bitter edge on a bitter due to the water.
Very dry bitter edge. You won't get that with a London the water that was intended for pale ales.
Okay.
It would be a much and I've brewed water or pale ales with water like this London pale water, and they are very soft, still very tasty, but that hard edge from the severe drying out
from sulfur
that you get with a Burton water, it's not there. And that can be great, especially when you're talking about a very modest bitter that also has a good malt note to it. It's no wonder why they made great bitters in London.
Yeah. So I guess that, Jamil, I mean, in your opinion, of a good bitter, a good extra or a special bitter, it's a balance of the malt and the hop character.
People people they believe. They hear the word bitter, and they're thinking, oh, it's, bitter like a West Coast IPA. No, it's, bitter relative to something else. It's more of a balance. It's more of a, it is bitter, but it is malty. It is balanced. It's not nearly as intense and harsh as some of the beers that we're drinking nowadays in the U.S. It's complementary versus, extremely bitter.
Okay, interesting.
And of course, I don't doubt that many of these bitter brewers in London probably did Burtonize their water to a small degree.
Sure.
But it looks like they wouldn't necessarily have to.
Okay.
They could make a softer beer with just using their tap water that was pre-boiled.
Okay.
Well, and how should one go about adjusting their water to something like this, to an ideal, bitter or an ideal porter? What's they start with their common, tap water, boil it, little additions. Should they be, checking the specs on their water? Should they be starting with RO water? What's your recommendation for the home brewer when they want to make something like this?
It's hard to say because different tap waters are very different, and some of them can be adjusted pretty easily, and some are just maybe too darn mineralized to start with, and you really have to boot them down the street and say, okay, we got to go get some distilled or RO water. So there isn't a hard and fast rule with that respect.
Martin, I think I should mention that you have a very good brewing water spreadsheet that can help brewers.
And of course it takes a little bit of getting used to, but if you're willing to invest the 10 or 15 minutes it actually takes to look at the instructions and read and understand what the heck it's doing, then you can get there. But if you're a lot of people like some other simpler software and whatever suits you, but getting the mash pH closer to a more ideal range, that's the biggest improvement that anybody can make to their beer.
Okay, with regard to water, yeah.
Absolutely. And in the old adage, if the water tastes good, you can make a great beer with it. No, there's no way. You can't make every good beer great with it. You might make one or two styles great, but otherwise you're going to have to learn to work with your water.
And at least understand how the water and the malts combine to create the pH and the final beer flavor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Going back to the spreadsheets, I think this is one thing where a lot of home brewers and even some craft brewers tend to really get wrapped around the axle in terms of numbers, trying to hit particular numbers, particular water profiles. I think again we want to emphasize that we're really looking for ballparks in terms of, in general, where is the chloride level or the sulfate level or the alkalinity. Is it, when we talk about it being low, we're talking less than 50 ppm of any one particular mineral.
Right. You hit it on the head. Don't fret about, I've got to have 55. No, if you're somewhere between 40 and 70, you're good.
Yeah,
you're good enough. You're not going to taste the difference. But, you can certainly worth targeting, but don't obsess.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a spreadsheet, you have a spreadsheet. And I get questions, and you probably do too. I'm trying to mimic this water, and my numbers aren't coming in right. Well, wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's not trying to hit a particular number. It's trying to get within a range, get within somewhere close, something that mimics or comes close to a character of a water in terms of the total amount of alkalinity, the total amount of hardness, sulfate to chloride ratio, and again ballparking it. I mean, in terms of in your opinion, Martin, what's a high alkalinity water? Or what range are we talking about when we talk about high alkalinity water?
Well, of course, alkalinity can go stratospheric, but when it comes to brewing water, even the darkest of stouts would probably only need in the maybe 100 to 140 parts per million alkalinity as calcium carbonate.
Yeah.
So that's really fairly modest.
Mm-hmm. Compared to what you can find in nature.
Well, and for instance, the true Dublin water profile, from the Liffey River, the really alkaline stuff, the stuff that Guinness doesn't use. Its natural alkalinity is at like 250 ppm.
Okay.
So even Dublin water is too damn alkaline to make a good stout. You'll end up with a pH that's just way too high. You'll make a crappy stout with Dublin water. And Jamil, I'm sure you have commented, hey, your Dublin water profile that whoever you're judging their beer, it came out like shit.
Right.
Because it's so damn alkaline and it tastes like chalk.
I tend not to use those words on the score sheet, but
I know.
I do. I do tend to comment. Yes, and I think your point about shooting for pH range. I've always said just get the pH right, and then brew your beer and get your fermentation right, get all that right, and then start to kind of mess with the water profile a little bit. Once you can get all the rest of that stuff correct, then the rest, like John's saying, is seasoning versus serving somebody raw chicken.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And looking at the other end, for a really pale beer, then you're looking at an alkalinity that's actually less than zero. Often, for instance, a really pale beer, starting out with the RO water, you're still going to have to add a little bit of acid just to get the mash pH and the beer pH or wort pH down to the right level. So
5.2 to
functionally,
5.4,
the alkalinity is less than zero.
Yeah, that is the residual alkalinity, the effect of calcium against alkalinity.
Exactly. Actually, both of them end up less than zero.
Mm-hmm.
Now, AJ DeLange will turn over in bed if I mention, because he's not in his grave yet. If I mention a negative alkalinity, but in fact, the things that we do as brewers, we are neutralizing alkalinity to the point where there is none.
Okay. So we are really zeroing it out.
Really zeroing, yes.
Okay. Interesting. Well, Scott, do we have any questions in the chat room? No? Okay. Well, we've stupefied people.
Oh, hopefully not.
Or maybe you've just answered everything so thoroughly. They're
That's probably it.
I got nothing.
No, then all the emails come later, and they'll be like, "Well, maybe you could do 5 more shows about this subject." Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, water is a fascinating subject, and I admit it's that's the majority of what beer is water.
All right.
But sometimes we look at information such as water from classic cities that has been published all over the place, and then we lose track of what it is we're trying to accomplish or what the brewer might have done in those cities. And so it's great to hear this information as to, okay, here's what they were using or most likely using, and here's the result, and this is why it makes a great beer. So don't just blindly go off and say, well, I'm going to make this kind of water or that kind of water.
Yeah. And Gordon Strong termed it best in Brewing Better Beer, creating Alka-Seltzer beer, if you try and duplicate some of those profiles, they're so extreme because brewers don't understand what those old historic brewers had to do to make their water better suited to the beer that they were brewing.
Mm-hmm. And let flavor be your guide. If the beer tastes good,
absolutely,
then your water's profile is fine. If your beer tastes horrible, maybe you want to look at what you're doing or not doing, and the source of your water. All right. Great show. If you're listening live, stay tuned. We got another one coming up, and we're going to talk about the waters of Burton and Bavaria, 2 of my favorite places in the world. And if you enjoy this show and want to keep seeing or listening to John and I rattle on, make sure to check out our fine sponsors like BlickmanEngineering.com. Blickman Engineering, 2 N's and a G and a couple other things. Yep. Tell them how much you appreciate that. Visit the Brewing Network store, thebrewingnetwork.com/store. You can buy some how to brew books. You can buy the water book. You can buy shirts and hats, and you can buy all sorts of stuff that they got there. And when you buy that, any profits go to the bottom line of the Brewing Network and help pay for shows like this. So if you enjoy us, go spend your money at the Brewing Network store. Till then, brew strong, everybody.
Brew strong.